Okay, we are in chapter 2 of the book of Luke. We are getting to the birth of Jesus. Now, I can't remember how far we got. Anybody?
We got to verse 6.
6? Okay, that's where I thought we were. All right, let me see. While they were staying there, the time for Mary to give birth to a child came, and she gave birth to her firstborn son. She wrapped him snugly and laid him in a feed box because there was no room in the guest house. Okay, the King James, when it says wrapped him in swaddling clothing, do you know what swaddling clothing means? Anybody besides Jesse?
Well, I learned it from my son. I didn't know about it whenever my kids were born, but it wraps them real tightly and put it in their arms, and it calms them down.
Yes.
Helps them sleep.
What was used on corpses?
Well, sometimes it was, but mainly it was used in certain cultures, just exactly like Mary says. And the Elizabethan age, which produced the King James translation, was one culture that did wrap them very tightly. The American Indians did the same thing, only they had what they called papoose boards, and the child would be wrapped against a board. Now, there's some benefits from it, and there is some detriments too, because it does not allow the child to develop. One way babies develop is they move every part of their body until their brains and their muscles are used to any kind of position. And that's only been discovered in the last decade or so that's true. And so it meant that babies didn't develop neuromuscular ability until quite a bit later, and were never as completely developed as they would if they were free. Now, they did not use swaddling clothes in the first century Israel. They wrapped them snugly, and that's the reason I use the word. That means they did wrap them up, but they didn't do it tightly. They just wrapped everything around them. And by the way, they most often laid them only on their backs, which is something that is done today to keep, it lowers the sudden infant death syndrome much less apt to happen. And so just wanted you to get that over, because when people make different translations than that swaddling clothes, we're so used to swaddling clothes that the phrase that it kind of grates on people's nerves. Jesse?
One interpretation I heard was that these types of cloths are almost like throwaway cloths, and they would normally also wrap the dead in them.
Well,
and since one of the things the angel said in Matthew was look for a baby in that type of wrap, like a sign.
Yep.
And in a sense, he was born to die.
Well, I think that's a little too fanciful.
Okay.
Now, people tend to get, Mike, they tend to get too fanciful. You have to be real careful about connections like that. I'm not saying it's impossible that that's what the writer had in mind. I'm saying that I'm skeptical that it is. There's much debate about the grave clothes that Jesus had. Even if they did wrap the dead in tight linen bands, Jesus was not, because Joseph of Arimathea did not have time to do that. And he didn't even have time to put spices and ointments on. You remember? So the whole thing about Jesus' burial was that it was rushed, and that he was wrapped but not tightly or anything. There was something about the face cloth that was unusual, but I've heard all kinds of, and read all kinds of speculations about it. And of course you've got the Shroud of Turin. I am open-minded about the Shroud of Turin. It goes in cycles. You will have a decade in which people are sure that it is as old as the first century, and then you'll have a bunch of debunkers come along, and it's 13th, 14th century, and so I've read every bit of the material that I know has been written on it, and I still have an open mind. But I'm not going to make any conclusions from it. And the word manger does not mean very much to modern Americans. So I just translated it literally, feed box. And everybody that has any knowledge at all of raising animals knows what a feed box is. And it was the sign that, well, it's what you would expect to find in a barn thing. Now, that people did stay overnight in them. And notice I translated it guest house, because that's what they called them. There was very few places for overnight guests to stay in the ancient world, because so many of the places where you had accommodations to sleep were houses of prostitution. They were owned by the Roman government for the people that worked for the government. And so there were very few places. That's the reason that hospitality is so emphasized in the New Testament writings, because unlike other ordinary people, the early Christians traveled a lot because they were on mission. They went out to evangelize the world. And it was necessary then, if you were going to do that, you had to have a place to stay. And so one of the duties that went along with being a believer was furnishing a place for Christian missionaries and others that weren't missionaries but were just traveling for whatever reason to stay. And that hospitality was when I was younger, you could find people that would do that. You could, if you visited in a church that you were out of town, you would get invited to come home with 2 or 3 families. that is not as common now because we have good places to stay, but it's still practiced by people. Okay, in the same region, that means in the region of Bethlehem, there were shepherds living outdoors and keeping watch over their sheep at night. Now, people argue about this, that if it was in December, shepherds wouldn't be outdoors with their sheep. That's more speculation than it is historically based, because as far as we know, shepherds stayed out with their flocks. I never will forget going and spending a night in the motel and then attending services in Elko, Nevada in 1977. And Elko is a Basque word. How many of you know what a Basque is?
It's a part of Spain, up in the northwestern part of Spain.
Yes, it's up in the Pyrenees that separates Spain and France. And it's also spills over into France. The Basque people are a completely separate culture from the Spanish. Their language has no connection with Spanish. In fact, linguists don't know any other language except perhaps Finnish. That's the people that live in Finland. Could be some kin. It's a very strange language. For instance, reason I'm talking about this is Elko was originally populated by Basques. And the man who taught the Bible class, one of the elders, was named Ixix. And he was very good. And his father still clung to the old traditions, and he was out in a kind of mule-drawn wagon that we would call a RV. He lived in it. He had a small stove, he had all of his food, all of his clothing, everything. And so they stayed out, even in the winters they have in Nevada, to take care of the sheep. Now, I'm going to ask you, do you know the attitude of the Jews toward shepherds? Anybody?
Not very high.
I thought they were considered dirty and.
Good.
I probably heard that from you at some point.
Who asked the garbage man?
That's not a bad metaphor, Jesse. They were unclean. According to the rabbis, especially those who were Pharisees, they were not allowed to attend the synagogue. That's one of the things that in the book of Acts, you remember, where Peter is staying at the house of Simon the tanner. They felt the same way about tanners, only worse. Now, why would they feel that way about a tanner?
Because of the death.
Yes, because he handled dead animals. And so both tanners and shepherds could not attend the synagogue. It's almost like in the Catholic Church where you can't be buried in holy ground if you're certain kinds of people. And so this is the original readers of this would get a message that I want you to get. Now, who came first to see Jesus? The shepherds or the wise men?
Shepherds.
The shepherds. Now, I think that's important, and I'm not just being fanciful, like I said. The first people that worshiped Jesus, and they did worship him, that is, they showed their awe of what they had seen, were the lowest class of people.
Lowest on the totem pole.
Yes, the bottom on the totem pole. And then you have the intellectuals, and that's what the so-called kings or magi were. They were the intellectuals of the time. So you remember Paul in Romans said that I am in debt both to the cultured and the uncultured, literally is what it says. It means the educated and the uneducated, is the way that's one of the rewrites I have done in Romans, is to change cultured to educated and uneducated. And so you have these uneducated, unclean people that worship, the first people to worship Jesus.
Brother Prince, when Jesus referred to himself as the good shepherd, what was the?
That means and it goes back to the Lord is my shepherd,
Oh, okay.
is that he assumed a position of service.
Okay, but it was not relating to this fact that it was the lowest class.
No, well, in the sense, yes.
As a servant.
Yes, but yes. Remember that you have the idea of servant leadership, servant king. The king of Israel was supposed to be a servant of Israel. They not near all of them were, but that's what Jesus is meaning when he says, I am the good shepherd. I'm the shepherd like the Yahweh, and serve. See, when God had accepted the material of the 23rd Psalm, the Lord is my shepherd, Yahweh is my shepherd, the idea he was allowing himself to be seen as putting himself down with respect to all people, just like Jesus did. You remember I've used that upside down triangle to emphasize that Jesus served all people. That's what is implied in this word, the Good Shepherd, okay? All these little details that I've spent 65 years collecting, God gave me the ability to remember them when I need to. That's all I can say. I don't go around looking at the index and seeing how much I know. If I know it and need it, it's there. And that's been, it has to be a gift from God. I wouldn't know how to do that. I couldn't teach anybody else to do it. I couldn't do it. But that's what's going on here. Suddenly an angel of the Lord appeared to them, and the glory of the Lord shined brightly on them. They were terrified. Now, if you were out in the countryside, probably bedded down on a hill, how many, I know you've seen Western movies where you had the cattle drives to the railheads. That's the way I visualize the way they would be. Now, they might have one person awake watching the flock, but sheep tend to bed down at night, just like cattle do. And if something didn't disturb them, they would sleep through the night mainly. And then just suddenly, the sky turned bright. Now, I think I've shared with you that once in my life, I saw a meteorite explode. I could take you within 100 yards of the place where it was, and it was up on a hill between Abilene, Texas and Albany, Texas, called 9 Mile Hill, and I could see for 20 miles and out over the plain. And terrified is exactly the word I would use, because your body and your terror reflex works before your rational brain can. Immediately I knew what it was, because it was the blue-white light that comes from that. But to just be driving along there about 10 o'clock at night by yourself, and then just the darkness becomes, it was almost as bright as daytime. And that's, again, the way I visualize this. See, we use our experiences to visualize what we read in Scripture. And that's the reason I share my experiences with you, because I use them as examples to equip you and maybe to stir up your own memories of things like that. So, terrified. And it is a very strong word for fear. They were terrified. The angel said to them, "Stop being afraid." Now, here's another thing that I very careful in translating. You can, in Greek, there's a different way of saying stop doing something you already are, or you can say don't start doing something that you're not doing. And this is stop doing what you are. And I think that, and I don't know any English translation that makes that distinction, and it makes a lot of difference. So that's one of the personal reasons that I'm making the translation. That's always been a pet peeve of mine since I learned about it, is why nobody just translates it so that you get the same experience that the people did who got it written first time. Stop being afraid, for you see, I am telling you good news of a great joy that will be for how many people? All people. I want to just drive that fact home always. Jesus is the Savior of all people. That upside down triangle. He is at the wouldn't be apex because it's facing down. What would it be? The down pix or something? He's at that point where he carries the load of every human being on his shoulders. There's nobody. I don't care how bad they are. I don't care how wicked they've been. I don't care where they live or what color they are, whether they are illiterate or got PhDs in 5 subjects. Jesus is their servant. He died for them. That would change, folks, would change our attitude to some groups of people that are outcasts in our minds if we realize that Christ died for them. That's the reason that all human beings have value. They don't have value because of who they are, what they've done, how much property or money they possess. They're valuable because Christ died for them, for all people. Now, that's a powerful idea. And by the way, it's one of the ideas that this country was founded on, even though there were many people at the time that didn't practice it. Just like there's many people today give lip service to that don't practice it. But it always stands in judgment of our behavior. If we don't live up to it, we live under its judgment. And we don't have any right to feel very good about ourselves if in that we have that knowledge and don't act upon it. All people. Today in the city of David, a Savior was born for you, who is the Lord Messiah. Now, I was in a quandary in translating the word Christ in the Gospels. N.T. Wright maintains that it ought to be translated Messiah in every place it appears in the Gospels. I tend to agree with him, but that's a little, but most people would feel that it's a little radical. And so I compromise sometimes on that. I may go back and translate it Messiah in every place before I'm through.
You know, in my Bible says the Christ is Greek, the Messiah is Hebrew, and both mean the anointed one.
Yes, but the reason that Messiah, the reason N.T. Wright, he wants to emphasize that this Jesus is the one for whom the Jews had been looking and expecting. And we have, what shall I say, Goyized Christ so that we don't get the full impact of it, where Messiah does give us that full impact. Now, see, I'm arguing with myself here, and I haven't made a final decision about that yet. Since I didn't translate them all Messiah, the amount of work it would take is one of the things that,
So
yeah.
I'm curious why you wouldn't, or what did you put instead of Messiah?
Christ.
Oh, just Christ?
Yes.
Oh, I see. So it'd be taking the word Christ out of
Yes.
everywhere.
Yes. And see, that's the reason I say it's pretty radical to do that.
Radical Christectomy.
You know, you persuade me.
There is a feature too, because it's digital, you can have a search and replace to do, every place it says Christ.
I know.
change to Messiah.
And so I've got to learn how to do that,
Yeah.
which is the work I'm talking.
I figured that.
When we're describing Christ as not being the apex, but the bottom of the pyramid, the terminology can be in astronomy. There's a zenith and a nadir. And so Christ is both of those at the same time.
What did you use for the top?
A zenith. Zenith.
Zenith.
That's the term in astronomy for the uppermost part of the sky. And then if you look down
Well-
through the earth, the other way it's nadir.
Well, I know it's native, but the other word I'm not from either not hearing right or not.
Zenith.
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 Like,
Zenith.
yes.
I was hearing Venus. And I could just see Aphrodite up there.
It's up there too.
What does the word Christ they wrote in Koine Greek, right?
Yes,
Was written in that. What does that mean in that kind of Greek? Does it have really no meaning?
anointed. It means to anoint. It comes from the root word Christos.
Like christening. You get-
Well, it means to anoint.
So would it have been used for anyone else besides Jesus, that word?
Oh yes,
priest.
the kings, priests were anointed. It was a standard experience to set somebody apart for service.
But the word Messiah is only in respect to the anointed one who will come to redeem God's people.
Yeah, but the kings were called Messiah
In the Old Testament.
in the Old Testament.
Yeah, they were anointed too.
yeah.
So was the prophet.
Yes, but see, it's the difference between they seem like the word day just means a day, but if they say the day, it means a day when God intervenes in history. See, words can become technical, even though they're just exactly like everyday words. I'm trying to think of a way. When we say the president, we're not talking about the president of a university or anything like that. You know, we know who the president is, and that's close analogy for the way the word Messiah became attached to the coming one. Okay. And this will be a sign to you. You will find a baby wrapped snugly and lying in a feed box. Suddenly, a great heavenly host of angels. Now, literally, it just says the heavenly host. And the Peterson in the Message translates this the army of angels, or the angelic army. How does he?
Get it here.
What?
I'll get it right here.
The angel armies. That's what it is. The angel armies, because the Hebrew word translated host can mean. It means a large body of a large organized body of beings, and it is used both of the army and of the vast number of angels. And so this, I did not translate this that way because it would sound like I was plagiarizing Peterson. So what I did was translate it both ways. A host of angels. See, and because our word host used this way means many, a large body. A host of angels appeared with the angel. Now, see, you had one angel, and then you had suddenly the whole choir was there. They were praising God, saying, "Glory to God in the highest." Now, little controversy. There's almost every word in the Bible has had controversy because scholars got to make a living. This can be the God who is highest in the heavens, or it can be that the glory, in other words, you're raising the glory of God to the highest heavens. So the way I did it by using the prepositional phrase is a literal translation. And so you can still take it either way you want to.
Charles,
What?
two questions. One, back to the angels. In other places in the Bible, was this angel named?
No.
Never.
If you were going to speculate, Clarnell, it would probably be either Michael or Gabriel. Probably Gabriel, because he's the one, I know that angels don't have any gender. But, Gabriel is the one who appeared to Zechariah. Gabriel is the one who appeared to Mary. So you would expect it to be Gabriel, okay?
Okay, the other question is, were the shepherds the only one who saw the stars or the host of angels, or was everybody else's eyes blinded to this?
Why don't you ask me something I know the answer to? I don't know. And nobody does. I don't know whether it was a phenomena that occurred physically in the sky, or whether it was a phenomena occurring in the minds of the shepherds.
Vision.
Vision, yes. And it can be either one. It could be both, but I just don't know. Evidently, I don't want to say, I know I'm not going to go there. I was going to say there might be some reason to think that it did not appear to the other people because it didn't seem to be a general. Remember when Jesus died, the dead came out and walked among them. It definitely says there that the phenomena was seen by others, and the darkness and all. But it does not say one way or the other here.
Or maybe everybody else was in their houses asleep.
Yes.
The ones that were outside could see it.
See, you can open the door to speculation, and you can speculate and talk all you want to, and when you get through, you don't know any more than when you started.
Just think you know more.
Okay. Now, the next section, the next part of this, the parallel, and peace on earth to the people he favors. Now, that's not the way the translation of the King James is. I'm trying to remember how it does say it.
Peace on earth, goodwill to men.
Yeah, goodwill to men.
Yeah.
I think, though, that this is the better translation. I'm pretty sure it is. In fact, I wouldn't have put it down if I wasn't sure that it was. This is that the peace will come to the ones that God chooses. And we're not going to get into election and choosing right now. Later on we will.
American Standard says, peace among men with whom he is pleased.
Yes, and the American Standard is pretty literal.
Yeah.
And so this is to the people he favors. God, and I'm a little leery of the word favor because we talk about favorites, and that's not what it is. It is the people who are the people of God. I could have said the people of God here and been, Do you see how many decisions you have to make on every word? It took me a while to get to where I could run through the possibilities quickly. And that's one reason I do some nearly every day, is to keep that sharpness up. Okay. When the angels departed back into heaven, the shepherds began to say to one another, "Let us hurry to Bethlehem and see this thing which has happened, which the Lord has made known to us." And again, they began to say. You can just say, as many translations, that they said to one another. But in Greek again, this is called an inceptive aorist, and it means they began to say. They started saying to each other, would be another thing. And it's in the what's called hortatory subjunctive. Let us. And it's a way of debate. It indicates a debate among them. That you could hear one shepherd say this and one say that, and the bottom line is they decided to go into the city and see this. They hurried off and found Mary, Joseph, and the baby, who was lying in a feed box. After they had seen them, they spread the word about the child. Now, notice how often this phrase is going to be used in the Gospels. Somebody encounters Jesus, and what do? They go out and tell others. That's not an accident that the Gospels emphasize that, because that's the paradigm for all people who encounter Jesus. That's there's no, it wouldn't even have to be a command to go and preach the gospel to the whole world. There's every encounter with Jesus in the Gospels, or say almost everyone. The people naturally do that. If you have really experienced the impact on your life, you cannot help but do it.
Even when Jesus said, don't do it.
Yes, exactly. He tried to control what they said. He didn't, sometimes he told them, don't even tell anybody what happened to you. Sometimes there's various degrees of it. The only people that he healed and did not tell to do that were, guess who? What?
Gentiles?
Gentiles. Every one of them, Mary is a Gentile. Did you learn that in the ladies' class? Or?
I don't know where I learned it.
But it's true. The Syrophoenician woman, the woman at the well in Samaria, he did not tell them not. And that lets us know that the reason that he told that way, he knew the Jews would misunderstand who he was. They wanted this political Messiah, this all-conquering one.
They wanted to make him king.
Well, by force.
Yes. After defeating the 5,000, that's exactly what they wanted to do.
Yes. Okay. Everyone who heard what the shepherds told them was amazed. Now, see, this is something we need to get. This is the start of something. And by the time Jesus came to the point of his death, nearly everybody in the whole country knew something about him. Now, they would know varying degrees. They would know, but they would know he was unusual. Do you remember the episode that we're going to have on the resurrection day of the two disciples that were on their way to Emmaus? And Jesus joins them, the resurrected Jesus joins them, and he says, Jesus says, what were you talking about when I came up on you? And they said, are you the only one in Jerusalem that doesn't know about these things? So this gradually, this spread by word of mouth. The problem with word of mouth is what?
What starts doesn't come out as it finishes.
Yeah, any of you ever play the old game of gossip? I know. I know that if you have, you know what the result. And but it's what they had. If you weren't raised in a small, fairly isolated community, you just don't know how things can spread and how distorted they can get.
That's your news network.
What?
That's your news network.
Well, yes. If you go on YouTube, I carry on some pretty heated discussions with my friends on Facebook, and it amazes me how hard it is to express yourself in a few words, and how distorted people can make it.
Carolyn heard from a neighbor this week that her husband had died and her old father had
My
come to
father
live with her.
had to come live with me. He Roger out in the yard. Oh my word. Kind of a no-deal old lady who lives down the street, and she said the mailbox, cluster boxes in our yard. And she said, I'm so sorry about your husband. And I said, what about it? She said, well, you lost your husband, didn't you? I said, no, he's in the house. She said, that's not your father living with you? No, he's trying to look like my
I'm not going to touch that. Our time is up, though, and it's time for Alicia. I thought this has been a really interesting class.